back to African Voices TV. You're with me, Leah Chilengwe, your host. We're talking all things Black History Month and the experiences of Black people in the UK. I'm still with my guest, Leah Chilengwe.
Yes. Chilengwe. I think of my husband when you say Chilengwe. That's why I smile all the time.
Oh, bless. I hope he gets to watch this anyway.
Well, I always
tonight.
say I'm married to the most handsome man in the world.
Goodness me. No, I have seen him. He's lovely. He's a very good man. And speaking of that, he's been part of your brilliant journey as a Black woman. You met him when you were really young, and then, but look, you're this woman now who can talk. I love your book. I've read it. And you can talk about your journey as a Black woman in the UK, not just in UK, you're from Sheffield.
My formative years, you know, my life in the Sheffield, my life in the UK, in the skin of a Black woman, you know. The thing is, when people read my book, some people find themselves in the book and they feel like, oh, is she talking to me? She's talking about me. No, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about me. And I think that the stuff that I talk about as a Black woman is very uncomfortable for people to probably swallow sometimes, because it's me in an environment where you are and it's happening to me. So I think sometimes it's easier for people to want to ignore it or to debunk it, but it's a journey of a woman in my skin in this environment.
What are the highlights?
I think the highlights for me, if I talk about Sheffield, would be the challenges I had maybe in church as a Black woman, the challenges I've had in work as a Black woman. And it's not because people are bad people. I think it's just because people are ignorant people. And I think you've got a choice to want to be educated or to remain ignorant in the things that really affect people of color. So I think the sadness for me mostly is maybe the stuff like I talk about how I used to work for this organization in Sheffield. I rose to the dizzy heights of a director, and then suddenly it's almost as if the forces that be thought, who is she? Where did she come from? And my life became a living hell, and I can't really tell you what really changed. But what we said in part one, where we said, is it unconscious bias? And I said, no, actually, sometimes we're giving it such a respectable name. It's sneaky racism. It was stuff that was being done to me that was so difficult for me to pinpoint. I was definitely being treated differently. And I felt like my chances of success were being hindered because I was being undermined and treated in a way that other directors weren't being treated. And I remember when I walked out, the first thing I did to the CEO, and I just said I was going. And one of my friends, I always remember this woman, like she was a woman, she wasn't of color, but she stood up and she said, no, actually what this woman is saying is right. And you need an ally, and the ally doesn't really need to look like you. And I think when the ally doesn't look like you, it's even more powerful. So she stood by me, and I went to this panel, and the first thing, I never said it, I was feeling discriminated because I was Black. And the first thing the panel said to me is, do you think she did that because you were Black? And I said, well, actually what I'm saying is I feel like my chances have been hindered. I've been treated differently by different people. I feel like I've been bullied out of my position. The only person who can tell you whether they treated me that way because I was Black or not is the person who's doing it to me. So it's really funny how even at that point of your lowest pain, the responsibility is on you to define and explain to people why you think you're in that position.
Absolutely.
You know? So I think I talk about that in my book. I'm very kind in the way that I say it, and my book is not about accusing people; it's about teaching people. And I think if you're willing to learn, you learn.
All right. Talking about the burden, not just as a Black person, but as a Black woman, you know, there's so many layers on that where you're always asked to explain things to people, you know, and people don't do
justify,
the homework.
You know, are you feel guilty for feeling the way you feel, and so sometimes it took me years to finally stand up and say, enough.
Yeah.
Because it's the burden is on you. And if you say, well, this is not right, well, you're too sensitive, you're too prickly. So there's a label put on your pain that makes you feel guilty to say something. There's a lot of black people who see it happening and now they want to, they will laugh at jokes they know are not funny.
They're not funny.
They will cringe and not call out something that a leader is speaking that's wrong because they're afraid to say, to stand out because they still want to belong. But the very fact that your leader is speaking in that way about a people who look like you keeping quiet is not going to help you.
No.
Because the very fact that it's coming from within just tells you what he thinks about people like you. And it took me a long time to learn that.
Absolutely.
It took me a long time to learn that. And what changed for me was my girls. As my girls were growing, I wanted my girls to see me different. What was I teaching them? That people could stamp all over who you are, who you cannot change to be.
Yeah. And make you feel inferior
because of something I can't change, or be sidelined, clearly sidelined because of something I can't change, but fail to speak up. What am I teaching my girls?
I mean, this is also all about white privilege, isn't it? It's those safe spaces where white people can feel entitled to making you feel like that.
But when you say things like white privilege, it's the white privilege for me, I think, has become an insult for white people. People turn, it's almost like their ears stop listening because it's like, oh, there we go. What does privilege mean? You know, or racism has also become like, we're not going to hear, well, being called racist, and it's a defense thing. You can be a very nice person and still be racist.
Absolutely.
You can be, you see, and I think we equate racism to niceness. We equate racism to being kind. It's not. It doesn't go hand in hand.
It's what you do.
It's what you do.
Yes.
In order to stop a different people group from progressing in your organization because of the color of their skin, because they speak different from you, because you cannot pronounce Chilengwe.
Yes, absolutely. And also because your standard is supposed to be the standard as opposed to what I am.
People will say to me, oh, Leah Chilengwe, oh, I'll just call you Leah. I say, no, you won't.
No, I'm Leah Chilengwe.
You don't get to choose what to call me. I'm not Kunta Kinte. Come on.
Yeah.
You know?
You know, when I think of what you've just talked about regarding the way you've brought down privilege to kindness or the kind of standard that's given. Coming from Zambia myself, my heritage means that I was able to speak multiple languages. But in the school grounds, I was not allowed to speak any language of mine. And it was normal back then. But now I think about it, I was punished for speaking a language other than English. Colonization. I was punished. And so in your mind, you go back home and you think that the right way to do things is to actually just be able to speak English and not... Like, you start to shy away from your own languages, your own culture, because it's been brought down to this thing that's insignificant.
And that's why I say in there, so when you say, when I talk about the challenge I had in my workplace, for example, the question I asked the panel was, we need to talk about, so you've done that to me. Why have you done that on a conscious or unconscious level? I can't answer that. You know, I can't answer why you have hurt me. You know, and I think we need to start changing that round. But it's because we've become in a culture where you've got Donald Trump, you've got Brexit, and it's become so polarized that the message is being lost. And I'm always saying to my girls, let's be careful that we're not part of the noise. And that's why maybe I haven't really lent a voice to stuff like that until now. For example, I believe in Black History Month. I believe in the Black Lives Matter movement. It's to some people, it could be a slur word. But then I still challenge ourselves. Like when we say Black Lives Matter, who are we trying to convince? You know, and I'm not saying the movement that's in America. I'm talking about us on a day-to-day level. When I wake up and say Black Lives Matter, I'm not saying white matters don't, white lives don't. What I'm saying is, for me, I'm an endangered species.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm an endangered species. So when I'm saying Black Lives Matter, I'm saying we're endangered in opportunities. We're endangered in in
being criminalized.
We're in danger in being, characterized. Yeah. We're in danger. So as an endangered species, it's like those videos you see where they say, let's put money for the zebras. And then somebody's going, but what about the lions? Well, the lions are not endangered, you know.
Right now
we're talking about the zebras. Yes. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's things like that. So for me, I always say to the girls, like I wake up and I'm not going to people going, I'm born a woman. It goes without saying.
Absolutely.
So in my world, I matter.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what my book is about. It's about picking yourself up and not going to oppressor to try and validate who you are. You need to find that within ourselves, and maybe it's things like Black History Month, but also it's on a day-to-day basis where we make decisions to make choices that celebrate ourselves.
Can I just take you back to that part where you're saying you need to show the oppressor that you don't need to show, but you have, it's within yourself. Talking about self-love, and I think that
other people might think that's a swear word, but there we go.
But self-love is a lot around. You talk in your book about, for example, your hair. I think you had an experience in the workplace. Could you talk to us about that as well?
So I think it was right at the cusp of, when people are finding their natural hair journey. And I think a lot of our white counterparts don't really understand how hard and coarse our hair is. And I think at some point we were told, and you see that in the beauty industries, in the magazines that we read, that you need to sleek your hair up and it needs to be flowy. And the description of beautiful is she had flowy hair. And I'm thinking, my hair's never flowed a day in my life. No wonder my daughter wanted to be a blonde girl. But when I started embracing my curls, I started to learn about my hair more. And I realized that actually it was it wasn't as coarse or as hard to maintain. So I took my afro out and I used to go into this workplace and would go into board meetings. And it was full of middle-aged people of British heritage and me. And you being a womanist, if you look at it, it was men, me and another lady. So I remember once going in there and I'd been preparing for this, and I talk about in there preparing for this meeting, and I was like, yeah, today I wanted to shine. You know when you just think, today I'm going to blow because mostly I go into meetings and I've got a PA, and people will talk to my PA.
Because she's white? Because
she's white, and assume that it's the subtle things, isn't it? So you go in and you're like, please look at me, and it's the conversation is with your PA until they realize, oh, actually, this is the person you need to talk to. So I go into this meeting and we're chatting, and my boss says to me, can I speak to you outside? And I thought, this is a pep talk. I am going to be told, go
Great
Leah.
Stuff.
And he said to me, have you ever considered straightening your hair? I thought, what? That's not how the dialogue went in my head, And I thought, straighten my stuff. No.
Yeah.
And he said, well, in some quarters it could be considered militant. When? So I think I say that in my book where I said, when did the hair that was put on my head at my time of birth become a symbol of militarism? When did that happen,
Yeah.
How can we be afraid to take what is ours in our head because somebody thinks it's not appropriate? Who sets the standards of appropriateness is the question asked.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Whose standard, Like our storytelling, our way of storytelling as Africans.
It goes back to what we're taught, the magazines we're reading, the movies we watch, all of that sets the standard of what we call beautiful, acceptable, or not, as the case may be. And I think I say it in a book where I say, well, this guy was overweight, really stuffy, always sweaty, greeting people with hands. I thought, if I can suck up your sweaty palms.
Take my gorgeous afro.
You can live with my gorgeous fro. It's my gorgeous fro. Yeah. So it's things like that it's there. And I think that even this video, people will take offense because I think it's easier for people when we don't speak.
Yeah. Perhaps quite rightly, your book is titled All Grown Up, and you say overlooked undervalued and underestimated. That's quite powerful. But when you declare that, it means that there's the other side of this. There's somebody who has not realized that they've been undervalued, underestimated and overlooked. And usually it's our young people.
Yeah, or maybe they have. They know they're being undervalued. They know they've been overlooked.
But what does that do to their mental health? In fact, even adults. So I wanted you to talk a bit about that, because you touch on quite some significant things, especially your own history with mental health as a child, well, mental health within your family, and now you're also doing some work around it.
Yeah. So we said I was a scientist, and then I became a social kind of thing. But I really feel like I've reached a stage in my life where I counsel a lot of young people, older people. But I'd really like to become a proper counselor, because when you kind of look at it, there's a lot. The statistics are showing there's a lot of mental health illness in our young black people. And could it be that we've talked a lot about prejudice, racism, and conscious bias, that there's a split in our children or in the young generation who are coming up, who don't know who they are, who have got nobody to speak to, who understands their journey, because, like you say, people will be like, suck it up, it's time to stop talking about it. Where does the kid go where there's a reference of where somebody understands them?
So beyond the activist telling you, actually, this is wrong, you should stand up for yourself, it's how do I heal from that, and how do I find within myself?
And sometimes the healing starts by standing with somebody who says, I get it.
Yeah.
I get where you're coming from. However, let me flip it on. Flip it onto the other side. So, and I think that a lot of the challenges I see in the workplaces of black people are rooted in mental health. But because we come from a culture that just teaches us to suck it up and see, people are suffering with mental health and not getting diagnosed and not getting help, because there is no help out there that will truly understand the culture and the bedrock of what they're going through today. How am I going to go to somebody and talk to them about the stuff and the struggle that I'm feeling in the workplace? Because if I do, the type of stuff I'm suffering from asks me to present evidence. So then the burden of proof remains on me, who is in pain, who is mentally feeling oppressed. It's not worth going, it's not worth going.
So the intersectionality, the multi-layeredness, if you will, of that, of the struggle that you're going through is there. What is it, though, that limits the number of black mental health counselors? What is it? Why don't we have as many?
I don't think we actually thought there was a need for it. I just think that it's a good thing that we're beginning to notice that it's not there. And I think it's because we, Sheffield City Council, the BEMA Group, whoever, we're beginning to lend our voice to it, and we're shining light on it. And suddenly I'm thinking, there is a need. And there is only a need because people are talking about it. And and because as black people, we've never really thought of counselling as being a major part. We're taught, we've seen tougher stuff, we've seen big challenges. So something comes, we just tell yourself, I can deal with that. We tell our children
we shelve it sometimes.
We shelve it, or we tell our children just get on with it, And yet I think there's an importance in our society to sit, breathe, take a pause and take stock.
Yeah, and now that you say that, I've just remembered that Sheffield Hallam University has actually organized a Black History Month event around mental health for Black people, and that's taking place on the 11th of October. I do think that that's quite significant. It's important that people should know about these things and should be able to learn. It's a free event. I'm hoping that people will actually go to it. Rotherham as well. Rotherham gets a lot of stick, but they're also doing quite a lot of activities around Black History Month. I have to say, I'm running some workshops a workshop there. I feel very honored to have been asked. But it's that visibility of Black people who can speak, and I'm hoping to inspire people. It's not. Usually inspiration comes from within, but I'm hoping that I think you've inspired me. I'll become more visible, as you put. It's not for want of trying, to be honest. I think sometimes you always you're a little bit mañana in the way that you see. You think, I'm going to do it tomorrow, I'm going to do it tomorrow. But I think there's no time like the present to be able to tell your story and encourage another
on how you overcame.
I'm going to ask you something very important that I think you might be able to speak to better than I would. And we've talked about this once on the show here. I still want more answers. So there are lots of activities, like we've just said, around Black History Month. I find myself in spaces where, in theatre, in arts, free events as well, where Black people don't show up. And the answer I keep getting is that Black people are busy working. Also, there's no room for them to look after their children or have this leisure time where they can spend family time doing these things. Does that sound like something that you would relate to? Is it more difficult to make the leisure
my kids
time?
have grown, so I'm just trying to figure out of when they were younger. I think it's just not our thing. You know, like they are. The younger ones are more into, my oldest daughter is into poetry, and she's always looking for shows, and I think that
she's a good singer, by she's a rapper. What is it? Is it rap?
Well, I'll let you.
She's great at what she does.
She's great at what she does. She's great. She's really great at what she does. So I just think that it's just not our thing, you know.
Right.
But I think it's really more in the younger generation. So like I can see the young ones will be, we're going to that show, we're going to this show. If you look at the demographics of Black people in there, it's usually the younger side. I think as well, if you think about, if you emigrated to this country younger, when you were older, it's not a kind of thing that we do back home. We don't go to theatres. Those are not things, arts are not the things that we see. You know, we're busy trying to get our children to university. We listen to doctors, we listen to lawyers, we listen to engineers. So we're very, very narrow. So it's more interest.
So do you think it still comes back to the point of, are you doing those other things with the children together, or is somebody else doing these things with your children, Black children, because you're too busy? So Nkululeko, my colleague who sits with me here sometimes, he was saying, Black people have got 3 jobs. You know, they're just making money.
I mean, I'm a person who've got one job. I work 9 to 5. I only work Monday to. You hardly find me in a theatre, and I just think it's my interest. Like that's just not the thing. Okay,
maybe theatre was too specific, but I'm talking about, where's the quality time? Who is raising the children? Because you're busy working so that you could spend money on for a 3-week holiday only.
And I think that there is that aspect. However, if I speak for my people too, we find our fun elsewhere. It doesn't have to be in the shows that you put. You know, are they taking their kids to the park?
Okay.
Are they taking their kids to the cinema? Are they going out to eat? So we're in danger of kind of like measuring them on one parameter. So yes, we're not in the theatres, and
which is very specific, like
which is very specific.
But I mean, generally,
I think that they are very good parents out there, but they might not be doing things that we think that we would interest us. I'd never taken my kids for a theatre show. They went for a show. Oh, sorry, I keep pushing it, but I'm just trying to use examples of stuff that I wouldn't be interested in. So I would potentially take them to stuff I wasn't interested in if their friends' mothers told me there was something. I'd be like, oh, okay,
What about creation of spaces? So you said maybe it's the things we're interested in. Are we creating spaces for these things to happen? I was so impressed 3 weeks ago. Don't know if you've come across Professor Afua Twam Danso. She's created this space in Sadaka, a library space for young people to borrow books that are of African authors.
Oh, brilliant. I've told my friends.
That.
No, I think we are creating spaces. I think I think there's an element of the economic migrant who's working 3 jobs, who's just trying to put food on the table, you know, and I think that there's those parents who work nights, who potentially don't see their children, whose children are being, you know, parented by telly, for example, and that's not a criticism. It's the need of that family. Because if that kid doesn't eat...
I'm getting anxious that we're running out of time, and we haven't even talked about what you do with Life with Leah, your business. Anyway, how do people find you? What platforms are you on?
I'm on social media. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on... What's the other one? Facebook.
So is that all Life with Leah? And people can... So out of this book as well, you've been mentoring people on some of the topics.
I do workshops. I'm doing masterclasses for them. You know, just to kind of get the word out there.
Absolutely. I'm really proud of you. Thank you so much for joining us for Black History Month. You're exactly the Black woman that I would have loved to have on the couch today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. So that's African Voices. We'll be back with you next week. Thanks for joining us tonight.